Today, learn how to be wealthy by age.
I am so excited about this episode because I think this is something that everyone wants to know. Okay, based on where I am in life, maybe I've made good decisions, maybe I've made bad decisions, maybe I'm right at the beginning of my journey, but I want to know, how do I become wealthy?
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm there yet, but I know where I want to go. Walk me through what are the things I ought to know at each age and stage to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
And people are always trying to figure out, am I behind? Am I ahead? Am I right where I'm supposed to be? But I felt like today a little perspective could be helpful.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, if you think about it in terms of the world stage, worldwide, the median wealth for adults is around $8,200.
So that's across the entire world, total net worth, total wealth, $8,200.
Here in the United States, it's right around $93,000. So once again,
vastly
being
different.
an American actually is, we have things a lot better than we probably realize. So that gives you some context, some grounding on, we're already getting a somewhat of a head start just for living here in the United States.
And then even if we take a step back from the median wealth, think about this. If you have over $10,000 in total wealth, you're in the top 47% of the global population. If you have over $100,000 in total wealth, you're in the top 13% of the population. And if you have become a millionaire, if you have cracked through millionaire status, you are in the top 1.2% of the entire global population. So it is pretty significant. We talk about how to be wealthy, but just being here in this country alone is kind of putting you in a unique place for wealth building.
I thought it was interesting when we were doing this worldwide study of wealth. It is amazing that 4 out of 10 millionaires live right here in the United States.
Yep,
so
right.
this is a great, everybody watching this content, there is a great opportunity for you to choose today to be the day that you start building wealth, because I truly believe, and that's what the Money Guy Show and our channel is here to be, the platform that lets you know this is what you can focus on, this is what you can do today to actually be part of this success.
I love it. So Brian, let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about the 20s, because at this stage, it's likely that you are not wealthy yet, but you probably have a desire to be wealthy. So in this stage, it's very important to begin focusing on, okay, what are the things that I should be thinking about? And what are the things that I should be avoiding so I don't take myself in the wrong direction?
This one should be the easiest stage. I always say 20-year-olds have the biggest opportunity, and we'll talk about why in a second. But the thing that I think gets 20-year-olds is procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
They think they know that they're young, so they're like, hey, I'll just push this off. Plus, it's consumption, because you get your first job in your 20s and you realize, hey, you know what? I can use some of this newfound money that's coming in, and let's start boosting our lifestyle by monthly payments.
And it's so easy to think, okay, in my 20s, whether I'm racking up debt, oh, I've got plenty of time to pay that off. Or whether I'm not saving, oh, you know what, retirement is so far away, I have plenty of time. And while that is true, when it comes to being wasteful, it is exponentially more expensive to waste time than to waste money. And so I think in your 20s, you have to really focus on that so that you don't flip your financial life upside down.
Well, I think that there's a true present bias. We love instant gratification. When you think about deferred gratification, which we all know is the building blocks discipline to the first ingredient of wealth building, it's just so easy just to say, you know what? I have plenty of time. I'm going to focus on today, but that is not healthy. And Bo, you actually have some stats to give a little color to this.
Yeah, if you look at those in the 20s, right now, those in the Generation Z generation, they have an average credit card balance right now of $2,800. So on average, $2,800 in credit card debt. Well, when you flip that and look at Americans in their 20s, they have a median retirement savings of about $6,700. So one thing here is encouraging. It looks like Gen Zers are saving. They have something built up in retirement savings. And if they understand how money works, that's incredibly valuable. But seeing that there's an average debt balance makes me sad, because there is no way to get ahead if you're racking up credit card debt.
Well, especially if you take into account Gen Z is 18 to 26 years of age.
These
So
are
I
young
already
folks.
have like $3,000 worth of consumer debt. is a lot if you think about it coming out of the gates, because we all know those rates right now. We recently saw, I was just assuming credit card rates were around 20% or a little over 20%, which is already just
high.
I don't see how in the world you get out from underneath that. But then I have recently seen actual credit card statements for people that it's over 30%.
That's right.
So if this is you, be careful, because debt is a bridge to nowhere. It's a trap. It's a false start. Don't use debt as your gateway into consumption.
Yeah, we tell you all the time that compounding interest can be your most fantastic ally, or it can be your fiercest adversary. And it's because we understand how our wealth multiplies through time. If you've not checked this out, you can go check out this resource at moneyguide.com/resources, and you can see just how powerful every dollar that you put to work can be for you in your 20s. Well, if you think about that the other way, every dollar you consume in your 20s can be very expensive. It's why we have these koozies that say this $1 beer cost me $88. So if you can flip your mindset into thinking about how valuable even small sums can be right now, you're going to give yourself a huge leg up when it comes to your 30s, 40s, and 50s.
I think the wealth multiplier is a perfect segue into kind of us talking about how do you actually get ahead, because you have in just droves the quantity that anybody who's older, we're jealous of you. Why do you think so many explorers are looking for the fountain of youth and other things? Is that we're always looking to capture as much time as possible. For all of you watching this in your 20s, you have it. So there is great responsibility with this very valuable resource of time, because as I've shared with you, discipline leads to, if you can be disciplined and have deferred gratification, it allows you to build margin or create money. But the most valuable ingredient to wealth creation is actually the third component, which is time. So don't waste the most valuable thing that you have, because it's almost impossible or hard to screw it up if you just will understand what you have and actually maximize it.
And that leads perfectly into, if we're thinking about not wasting time or making the most of our time, we also ought to think about how are we acting and behaving as consumers? What are the things that we're doing? And are we recognizing that the things we spend our money on, the things we spend our time on, are actually worthwhile endeavors? I think one of the things that I see happen all the time for young folks is they begin to recognize, you know what, I can afford anything in the world in just 4 easy payments. In just $9 a month. If I just stretch it over 60 months, and you don't recognize that that small, easy monthly payment actually turns into a fairly sizable annual payment. And that annual payment could actually turn into a sizable retirement savings, but we don't focus on that. We only focus on that short term, that monthly thing, and it causes us to overconsume and undersave in our 20s.
Well, it's all the rage right now with all the essentially expanded out or buy now, pay later.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of
for
thinking
everything,
about
by the way,
it
you
is,
can do it for everything now.
If you think about the fact that a $9 a month purchase, if you think about the point of sale transaction, you're like, $9, that's just not much money. But I need you to open your mind and think about that. That $9 is actually $100 a year.
Yep.
That $100 a year potentially is $10,000 from your future retirement. That is the way you need to be thinking about this. I love, but I hate being negative. And this is the part that I hate, that everybody is focused, you think about it as, what can I buy with that $9? We're thinking about what you can build with that $9. It turns into $10,000. That's why when we bring up like wealth multipliers and other things, get on fire with that concept, because if you can get addicted to saving and building for the future, there is no limit to what you can create for yourself.
And learn how to actually differentiate between the things that you truly need and the things that you want. I mean, you need a reliable, dependable automobile to get you from your house to your work in a lot of circumstances. You might want a nice car, a luxury car, a car with all the bells and whistles. Well, is buying that in your 20s the most prudent decision you can make, or should you focus on reliable transportation? So you ought to figure out how to use tools and tricks to impact how you consume, so that you make sure you're making wise consumption habits.
Well, we talk about this. You've got to make the good habits easy and the bad habits hard. So a big part of that is obviously gamifying the situation that, why don't I pay myself first? Why don't I make sure that I have allocated enough of my resources so that there's not all this wants versus the needs and separation. This is the type of stuff that's actually going to help you do. So let's actually talk about what are the guardrails to protect people.
Yeah, I think in your 20s, if you can recognize the guardrails, the big things that'll keep you out of the ditch, you're likely to set yourself up for success. And the guardrails are not incredibly complicated. Number one, are you following the food? Look at this. Financial order of operations. You go to moneyguy.com/resources. Do you know the best use of your next dollar? Should it be going to get that employer match? Should it be paying off high interest debt? Should it be building up your emergency fund? Well, if you know the best use of your next dollar, it will naturally keep you on the right path towards wealth building.
Yeah, well, I held up, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we obviously have the foo there. We've already talked about the wealth multiplier, but guys, here's what I want to tell you. It's a matter of saving and investing. 25% is Bo covered, but it's 25. Put guardrails up on what you spend on housing.
Yep.
We have an entire resource out there on housing checklists and other things like that. Go check that out. And then, of course, 23.8. I've seen so many of my friends when I was younger that had paid for cars that were reliable, got them through college. But then as soon as they graduated, they're like, you know what? I deserve or I have earned something nicer. And then they go load up the auto debt because there's an entire industry that's giving you graduation discounts, $1,000 toward purchases. They have created an entire sector just for graduates, and they're trying to encourage you get on the debt train. And guys, I'm telling you, do not try to impress neighbors or friends. They do not care. What does care is your 50-year-old version of yourself that's sitting out there crying and waiting, saying, please make the right decision so that we can have the best version of ourselves. Because if you can sacrifice, if you can do deferred gratification, in that decade of your 20s, you give us 10 years, you get 50, 60, 70 years to reap the benefits from this. You have to understand that small, deferred, taking a little bit today for that great, more beautiful tomorrow is what you've got to focus on.
I love it, Brian. And this goes without saying, credit card debt is in no way. Like, you should not be carrying a credit card balance. If you find yourself racking up credit card debt, not paying it off monthly, you may just not be a credit card person. So perhaps you need to do away with them, leave them at home, cut them up, don't use them. Now, you just said something so beautiful, Brian. You said that if I can just defer a little bit of today for that great, big, beautiful tomorrow, it becomes really, really exciting. We wanted to put together an illustration to show you just how powerful that can be in your 20s. So we had the team put this together, and this goes from age 20 to 29. And this is basically what we said. If you can save an additional 1% of your income today, how much of your future retirement income or pre-retirement income would you be able to replace? So I'll use a 25-year-old, for example. Every 1% that you can save at 25 has the propensity to replace 6.6% of your needed retirement income in retirement. So those small incremental changes that you're talking about, Brian, can have a huge impact if you start today. But you notice as you age, as you move through time, the numbers drop a little bit lower, a little bit lower, a little bit lower. So the sooner you figure this out, the more impactful those incremental decisions can be.
Yeah, I mean, I want you to think about that because I'm going to go even bigger with think about most people graduate college when they're 22. If I can just convince everyone when they get out there in the workforce, it doesn't even have to be college. Maybe you finish trade school and you're just getting out there. All those people in their early 20s, every 1% you can give us right now is going to be essentially close to a tenth of your retirement income. That's not that it's just going up a little bit. We're talking about this is hundreds of thousands of dollars by making one small little decision today to have that better tomorrow. Guys, this is what builds financial empires. Take it serious. Don't wait another day, because this is your moment to kind of conquer the future and have the best version of yourself.
And the other last little thing I'll throw out that is in your 20s, maybe you're not able to save 25%. Maybe you're just getting your employer match and you're saving 5%. Let this illustration be fuel for the fire. Say, okay, you know what? Next year I can do 6%. Okay, I can go from 6% to 8%. Just saving a little bit more can have a huge impact, so don't miss that opportunity.
All right, let's transition into something that Bo might resemble.
Oh, yeah.
This is what we call, in an affectionate way, messy middle.
Oh, yeah, it's
the
messy,
30s.
right? So in your 30s, this is when A lot of people fall behind, but and I want to say it's not their fault. We all had kind of own responsibility, but this is a hard decade. This is a hard stage of life. There are 1,000 different things pulling you in 1,000 different directions. You're likely getting married, you're having kids, you're buying a house, you're buying a car, you're advancing in your career, you're impacting your community, and all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, I'm not in control of my life anymore.
Now, I want to, because Reby in our show prep meeting was like, guys, but you have to make sure everybody knows this is still a positive decade. Lots of greatness.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Even though it's messy, there is still a lot of greatness here. It's, it's the old country music lyric that we always love to say is that the days are long, but the years are short. But it is one of those things where I want to we actually have two charts that we like to show. The first one on the financial stages of life, you can see your disposable income gets squeezed in this messy middle. It is one of those things as you have the family growing, you're getting married, you're buying houses, all the other responsibilities of life just start pulling on everything that's coming in. Your income is getting stretched and allocated, it seems like almost immediately.
Yep.
So that's one stress that creates the messy middle. But besides income, what else is getting squeezed,
The
Bo?
next thing is your time. And I think for a lot of people, this is the hardest part, right? We recognize that with all the stuff that we have going on, we don't actually have time for anything. We want to be great at our job, and we want to be great parents. We want to be great community participants. We want to be great at drinking a gallon of water a day. We want to be great at eating. We want to be great. All these things, and all of a sudden you recognize, holy cow, I woke up, I tried to be great in everything I did, and now it's time to go to bed again. You are not alone. This stage is difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult, and it's not just difficult for you. It's difficult for all the people that are going through it right now, and I think even the people that are maybe on the other side of it, they would agree, yeah, it was difficult. It was hard, but you can make it through it. And there are ways to get ahead even as you're going through this messy stage of life.
Yeah, so let's kind of go ahead and how do you get ahead in this as we want to cover a few of these things. I think it's not losing focus. We all have blind spots. We get busy. So it's important just to make sure we don't leave behind some important stuff just in the chaos that's kind of coming through life naturally. The first thing is don't overlook the power of risk management. What I mean specifically, there's a reason the financial order of operations has two steps that focus on emergency reserves. It's highest deductible covered, which is step one, and then it's emergency reserves, which is 3 to 6 months on step 4. Don't let your busyness let you overlook just setting up that core basis that's going to keep you protected and also keep you from letting a healthcare emergency or your car, having a car accident or your car losing a radiator, something that you don't see happening on a Tuesday, derailing your financial future.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. A lot of folks in their 20s, Brian, they'll say, you know what, I've got I need to save up $10,000. I got an emergency fund of $10,000. And then life goes on and life goes on and life goes on. And they don't recognize that they actually need to change that. Oh, well, it was $10,000, but then I got married. And now I got a mortgage, and now I've got kids. That trip to Whataburger no longer is a number one for me. It's number one, 2 kids' meals, and then whatever my spouse wants, right? It's a different type of thing you have to do. So one of the things that you may need to do in your 30s, especially if you've not done it in a while, is you might have to think about that B word. And I think you know the B word I'm talking about. You may have to look at a budget.
Yeah.
We say that for an emergency fund, you need 3 to 6 months of your expenses and liquid cash available. Well, do you actually know what your expenses are? Do you actually know where your dollars are going? Have you tracked to say, okay, this is how much I spend on utilities, and this is what my mortgage is, and this is how much we eat out, and this is what the grocery bill is, and this is all of the other things. If you've not worked through that exercise, perhaps it's time to do that, if for no other reason, to make sure you have your risks covered, just like what you said on emergency reserves.
Well, what I love is we've tried to create things to help you kind of accelerate your success. Because, the abundance cycle is what drives us here. Is we're going to load you up with all the free advice, all the information, let you become the best version of yourself. But we realized we needed to create some additional tools, some additional resources. So one of the tools that we've added is the Know Your Number course. If you go to learn.moneyguy.com, we have the Know Your Number course. And within the Know Your Number course is actually budgeting. You can work through some budgeting worksheets and other things. And what I love about, really marrying the budgeting process with the Know Your Number course is it lets you kind of then play with the toggles of the tool to kind of see, hey, if I put an extra $100 to work for me a month, what is that actually going to create for me in the future? Because now you can squeeze, how do you cut your expenses? How do you maximize income? All these things are interrelated, but don't skip steps. If you're having struggles with getting to saving and investing 20, 25%, or having struggles getting to emergency reserves, you got to know exactly where every dollar that comes into your army of dollars is going, and a budget is the way you're going to fix that.
I love it. Now, Brian, one of the things I think is interesting, we're talking about how to be wealthy at different ages and different stages. One of the questions we might have is, okay, well, what do my peers look like? If I just think about broadly the folks around me, we know right now the median American in their 30s has just $19,838 saved for retirement. Now, again, if you look at the wealth multiplier and you think about what that $19,000 can turn into, that's fantastic. But I would argue someone at 39 with $19,000 saved versus someone at 31 with $19,000 saved is very, very different. So I do think this is that decade, Brian, where you need to start getting serious about it. You need to start really paying attention to make sure that you're not falling behind, because it is so easy to fall behind in this decade.
Well, I want to, and look, I'm an optimist. You guys know this, but I think if we take into account that we just previously in the 20s, we saw that the average 20-something or the median for the 20s was close to $7,000. And here we are now closing out our 30s, and we're right under $20,000. That's only increasing by $1,000 a year. If you think about the whole decade, that's just not a lot. So I think that there's a lot of lifestyle creep that's actually occurring out there. And people don't realize, look, if you are in the situation where you're getting pay raises, you've been now in the workforce, not for just a few years, but actually over a decade, you should start having some traction. You should start seeing your army of dollars building upon themselves. And I'm just worried that there's a lot of people that don't know where their boundaries are, and they're developing some bad habits.
And I think one of the things that you can take away is that we provide flexibility in our rules to help you save and invest, because we recognize that this is a hard season. So we would make the argument, in an already difficult, hard season, don't make it harder for yourself than it has to be. Take advantage of some of the flexibility that we make available so that you can navigate it well. Because I see so many people, Brian, they get caught up. They're like, okay, I know the average age of a first-time home buyer is 36, and I'm 34 years old, and I need to go ahead and get married and have exactly 1.8 kids, and I got to go buy the house, and I got to put 20% down, and you just get lost in this spiral. It's already hard. Allow the flexibility that we put in place to be a reprieve so that you can navigate through this section of life well.
Yeah, we even, because this home buying is a big part of the messy middle, and it's not gotten easier. I actually think it's gotten, well, I don't have to say I think. I know for a fact it has gotten much harder. The home buying is especially hard, and that's why we do, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we do have a home buying checklist, because Bo, we have actually created a case study to show when you say lean into the flexibility of our rules, we have not had to change our rules. You know, you hear a lot of financial gurus have been saying, put down 20% so you can avoid the PMI. We've seen for decades now that that's just not the reality for most people. You know, most people on their very first home will only be able to put down 3 to 5%. But there's also another big decision besides just taking advantage of flexibility on that first home purchase and the down payment. It's also, do you choose a 15-year or do you choose a 30-year mortgage? Walk them through a case study we did.
Yeah, so let's think about this. Let's say a young couple, first-time home buyers, with a median household income of $74,580 household, so $75,000 household, want to buy a house. They're going to put 3% down, and they have to keep their monthly payments, principal and interest, below 25%. They understand the guardrail. So they're going to use the flexibility for the 3%, and they're going to understand the guardrail of keeping their monthly payment below 25% of income. The question they have is, well, should I choose a 15-year or 30-year? Well, I've listened to financial stuff, and I know, man, 15-year, I got to do it, I got to do it, I got to do it. This is what we mean by don't make things more difficult on yourself than maybe they have to be. Because if you actually look at this, if you assume that the 30-year mortgage has a 7.44% rate, we went and pulled that from current rates right now, and the 15-year has a 6.75% rate, and you do the mathematics to figure out, based on that monthly payment, how much house that they could afford. If they do a 15-year mortgage and they're trying to stay inside the guardrails, they can only buy a $181,000 house. However, if they use the flexibility of a 30-year mortgage, even though rates are at a higher level right now, they would be able to buy a $230,000 house as opposed to a $181,000 house.
And this is another reason I would really strongly encourage, go check out that checklist, because this is a moment in time. Yes, mortgage rates are way high right now. It's ridiculous how high mortgage rates are right now. But this is a moment in time. There will be reversion to the mean where we will come back down a little bit lower. I know when we did this 2 years ago, Bo, there was purchasing power was over $350,000 just because of the change in interest rates. So that's why it's important, if you go through our housing checklist, you can kind of look and not only take into account where interest rates are, but how long can you stay in an area? What's going on with your job? What's going on with your needs in your life? And figure out where the intersection point is so you don't force it in this moment in time where we have these super high interest rates. But it also will protect you from, if you find a good house and values in your area are starting to kind of come back down into a reasonable territory, you'll have the resources. You'll have measured twice, cut once, and made the right decision for your house. Do not overlook this is part of the messy middle. That's why we try to give you the resources to do it the best way possible.
I love it. And then the last thing, in terms of how do you get ahead in your 30s in this season of life, is work on building good habits. Because here's the fact of the matter. If you're not building good habits, then there's a really good chance that you're building bad habits. I mean, it's really easy to see this on finance if you're racking up credit card debt and you're not saving. But this is a stressful season of life, so it's really easy to also not have really great communication with your spouse, to not be there when your children are young, to not take care of your health, to not focus on moving your body and exercising. All of these different things, if you're not intentionally trying to put good habits in place, bad habits will likely fill the void, and your 40-year-old self is going to wake up and say, man, how'd I get here? Versus your 40-year-old self waking up and saying, holy cow, I did it. I made it through. I can see light at the end of the tunnel. That's the place that you want to be at as you move out of the messy middle.
There are so many correlations between health and finances. And I think a lot of people in your 30s, you're old enough now that you've had over a decade, that you've been out of school, but you're still young enough that you can pretty much do anything that a young person can do without physical limitations. Well, it's the same way with your financial life too. Yes, your dollars do not have the potential to multiply exponentially as much as they do in your 20s, but still, when you compare a 30-something to the 40-year-olds, the 50-year-olds, and 60-year-olds, the world is still your oyster. So I'm just telling you, take advantage that this is the moment, the decade, that just like you can get back into doing bench presses and squats and other things and exercise and get the best version of yourself, you can also do that to your personal finance. Don't let this decade slip through your hands where you're going to have much harder catch up. If you start this in your 40s and 50s, I want you to build that base financial health right now in your 30s.
And here's a great example of that, Brian. If you just save an extra 1% starting at age 30, by the time that you get to retirement, that 1% additional savings will replace 4.7% of your pre-retirement income. So your dollars still have juice in your 30s. So maybe, again, you're not hitting that 25% because life got hard and you have the messy middle and things going in 1,000 different directions. Maybe you're only saving 10%. Great. How do I get it to 11%?
Yeah.
How do I get to 12? How do I get to 13? Because in your 30s, it still has a huge impact on what your future financial independence life looks like. So if you can make those hard decisions now, it will allow you to hopefully get to make much easier decisions later.
Well, and what's cool to me is that when you're in your 30s, we know that you're getting serious about life, because I think you do recognize you're not at the midlife crisis phase, but you're definitely kind of getting purpose and your whys figured out. This is the phase still where if you realize and you said, you know what, I just got a 6% pay raise. If I take 3 to 4% of that, I could effectively increase my retirement income by 15 to 20%. That's incredible, and still a lot of bang for every good decision you make. So remember, maximize every incremental decision that comes your way, because this is the moment to capture still a lot of opportunity in the messy middle of the 30s.
I love it. All right, Brian. Now let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about the next decade. Let's talk about the 40s, because in the 40s, a lot of stuff can happen. I don't want to say necessarily it's a turning point, but I think realistically for a lot of folks, it is a turning point. It's the point where you say, uh-oh, or phew. One of those two things.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you've actually been practicing this, you've been a financial mutant for several decades now, this is where you actually might get to take your foot off the accelerator and actually look and enjoy and start to feel like you're getting into step 8 of the abundance goals and prepaid future expenses of the financial order of operations. But I do think there's a lot of people who get in their 40s and they're still that rudderless ship. And this is the point. I'm just, there's no way to say it. No pain, no gain in this decade, because you've got to play catch up. You've got to figure out where your direction, your purpose, and I also see this is the stage where decisions that in the moment might feel okay could be extremely just detrimental to your future, not only emotionally, but also financially, because we know for a fact that there's a lot of divorces that occur in your 40s. And divorces, because it doesn't just happen when you announce or you and your spouse decide that you're getting divorced. It builds up on the 2 years even before. But it's not uncommon to see the stat that divorcing families lose 77% of their wealth.
I love it. It's this idea that short-term decisions or short-term comfort or trying to avoid short-term pain can lead to like very long-term pain, long-term serious detrimental decisions inside your financial life. And so one of the things you have to figure out is, okay, in my 40s, if I'm going to try to catch up, if I'm going to try to not be a rudderless ship and I want to have direction and purpose, what are some things that I can do? What are some things that I can put into place? And the first thing we said is really isolate those things that are inside of your control versus those things that are outside of your control. Now, we're going to talk about the financial parts that are inside of your control, but there are either other things that are bigger and existential in your 40s. And Brian, I got to give you so much credit for this. You said, Bo, everyone has this. There is a voice inside your head that lives there.
Yep.
And that voice is either going to be an optimist or a pessimist, and you get to choose it. No matter what situation you're facing, no matter what life thing you're walking through, you have to figure out, are you letting negative thoughts into your mind that cause you to devolve and spiral, or are you figuring out how to turn those negative thoughts into positive thoughts that allow you to move forward? Controlling that voice in your head is one of the things that you can control. And if you ignore it and don't pay attention to it or worry, it will force you to continue to be a rudderless ship in your 40s.
Yeah, and that's why, I want you to get that voice under control and hopefully have the pep talk to turn it into an optimist. It is a time when, that's what I like about isolating getting away from all the noise and thinking about exactly what can you control. And there's really two components that are going to help you out in your wealth building journey. How do you spend less money so that you can play catch up? Or how do you go out there and make more money? Because spending less money is going to have limits.
Sure,
you're only going to be able to
have a family.
Yeah,
and
you're going to have things. So then, but you know what? Making more money can actually be limitless if you really put your mind to it, if you get creative on the processes. I know it's so much easier said than done, but it is the reality of the situation of isolate what you can control and then go become the best version of yourself.
I love it. And Brian, you say this all the time. In your 40s, you can refocus on your why. What are your actual goals? And I think one of the things you did great, Brian, is at 24-year-old or 25-year-old Brian Press was sitting there and said, you know what? At 50, I'm going to retire.
Yeah.
At 50, I'm going to check out. What I love is I got to believe that it was 40-year-old Brian that said, you know what? I'm kind of liking this. This thing that I get to do is pretty exciting. I imagine at some point along that journey, you did refocus that why. I said, hey, my goal might not be an age 50 retirement. My goal might be to get more financial information out there, take care of more people, travel with my family, grow an enterprise, whatever those things are. In your 40s, if you can refocus that why and make sure the decisions you're making are aligned to that why, it's a much better chance you're not going to be the rudderless ship, but you will be a ship on course towards a specific destination.
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot. Money's just a tool. There's a lot of things that we do in life that I think a lot of people are going after a false promise financially, meaning they think if I get to $1 million, my life's going to be so much easier. If it's $2 million, That's just not the way money and success have traditionally worked as I've gotten there and experienced things and even helped clients with it. So you better really spend some time on the exercise of knowing what's your why. What does that begin with the end in mind, and the fact that what does my best retirement look like? What will I be doing? Not just financially, but also just so I wake up every morning and feel like I have purpose and that I'm actually making the world a little bit better. Spend some exercises on that. How are you going to pay for college for the kids? All these things are interconnected. And that's what I want you to do when you're in this 40s phase, is because you do recognize, believe me, I'm about to exit this decade, and you get very sentimental, you get very, very reflective. So take advantage of all that special focus that you have in this decade to figure out how do you get where you want to be.
What I love, Brian, is in your 40s, or in our 20s and 30s, we're talking about incremental changes. Okay, if I can just save 1% more, 1% more, I would argue if you've not been doing what you were supposed to be doing in the prior decades, and you've found that you're behind, you're not where you ought to be from a saving and financial wealth building standpoint, then at 40 or in your 40s, it doesn't become so much of an option of, okay, well, how do I make incremental decisions? It's kind of like, how do I fix this? How do I right this ship? Because if you can do that in your 40s, reaching a 25% savings rate can still do remarkable things for you over the next 20 to 30 years. We actually ran the mathematics on this, and let's say that you're a 40-year-old and you've not saved anything thus far. If you start saving 25% of your gross income starting at zero at age 40, there's still a good chance that by the time you get to 69, so not even 70 years old yet, you would be able to build up a pot of money that could replace 80% of your pre-retirement income. Now, perhaps the situation looks better. Maybe you have a pension. Maybe Social Security will be a big part of your retirement income. Maybe you're able to downsize your life and decrease your expenses as you enter into retirement. It's not too late in your 40s, but you better take it seriously, because now it's a have to, not a might kind of want to.
Well, I don't mind being even a little harder, because when I look at these numbers, 40, 60, meaning if you save 25%, you can retire at 69 if you're starting out right at 40, 45, 74. I'll be Sergeant Slaughter. I'll be the one that tells you and looks you in the eyes and says, look, if you don't like these numbers, if they scare you, save more, invest more. Yep. What's wrong with, I know it's because look, you got to make some hard decisions while you still have decades in the future, because if you keep letting time slip through your hands, the opportunity and the option to fix this and isolate what you can control is going to leave you behind. So let's figure out, hey, wake up call. How do you actually focus on the discipline of creating margin and money in your life so you still have decades of time to let this money grow upon itself? Maybe you need to be saving 30, 40. Do what you have to do. Do the heavy decision today so you have the better tomorrow in the future.
All right, Brian, let's shift now. Let's talk about the 50s, because by the time in your 50s, there could be thousands of reasons why you might not be where you want to be, or you might not be exactly at the place you need to be. But this is the area where you have to refocus and redefine, all right, what do I want? Realistically, what do I want the next 10, 15, 25, 35, 40 years of my life to look like? And am I positioned for those things to be a reality in this decade?
Yeah, you're definitely in this decade. I think you're at the phase you see where you want to be. So now you're crossing the T's, dotting the I's. But you got to figure out, it's back to that question that I was trying to get the 20 and 30-year-olds to focus on. Are you ahead of the curve? Are you behind the curve? Are you actually on the curve? This really is where you probably need to be taking a measure of where you are in your financial life.
That's right. You have to take a measure of where you are to know if you are where you're supposed to be. And we have a great tool that will help you do that. You can go to learn.moneyguide.com and check out our Know Your Number course. We call this the finish line course. That's what you're ultimately working towards. How do I know if I'm on track if I don't know where I want to end up? If I don't know what my number is, how can I assess where I am today? So the Know Your Number course actually walks you through this. Hey, I want to retire at this age and I want to be able to live off of this level of income, and I have this much saved up right now, and this is my rate of return assumption, and these are my inflation assumptions. This allows you to know, okay, am I actually where I'm supposed to be, Or do I need to change some things to get back on track?
Well, I think, when you're younger, in your 20s, 30s, you're coming up with the concept of kind of what you want retirement to look like. So you can play horseshoes. You can just get close and say, well, probably $3 million is going to be a good number for me. Guys, in your 50s, you can't skip the homework. This is where you need to go beyond the basics of, you need to go reach out to the Social Security Administration. What does that Social Security statement actually look like for you? Go organize all those jobs you've had in the past that maybe had pensions or other retirement benefits, just to make sure you know what are all the cash flow options I'm actually going to have in retirement, so I can focus on what my expenses in retirement will look like and what's going to offset that. And then be realistic with how are you going to cover healthcare? We all know Medicare is at 65 years of age, but a lot of folks will have desires to leave either in their 50s, even early 60s. You've got to have the bridge to know how you're going to pay for healthcare. Now, look, I know since we've come out with the Affordable Care Act, there's more options, but a lot of states, the exchange doesn't have a lot of viable options. So don't skip this step thinking that it's going to be easy. You need to have time to do your homework.
I love something you just said right there, Brian. You said be realistic. I do think that one of the things that you need to do in your 50s is you do need to reassess. Are the goals that I've always had, are they realistic? Because it is, I don't want to say sad, but in reality, there are people who say, hey, you know what I'm going to do when I'm going to retire? When I retire, I've always wanted a place on the water. So I'm going to go get my beach house. And, I really want to take up sailing, so I got to get a sailboat. So I'm going to get a beach house and a sailboat. But, the kids, they're here, and I want to keep my house here, so I can't get rid of that. And, we want to be able to travel, so we need a big travel. And you start listing all these things that you want. And when we hear this, we say, hey, this all sounds wonderful. But unfortunately, I don't know that the resources that you've accumulated will allow you to do all those things. Is your vision for retirement what is actually available for you? Are the things that you want to do inside the realm of reality, or are they pipe dreams? That's not to sour you. It's more to set you up so that you don't retire and get there and start being frustrated and let down. So if you can go into retirement, if in your 50s you can start really honing in on reality, it's going to set you up for a more pleasant retirement. They'd be like, holy cow, I thought it was going to be lifestyles of the rich and famous, and it is lifestyles of the cat food hamburger patties.
Well, but here's what everything you just said, like the people who even are successful and are thinking about the lake houses or the boats or the RVs, those are trophies of life. What I want people to be focusing on is really, how do you own your time? How do you do things on your terms? You wake up in the morning, you do what you want, when you want, how you want. The only way you can do that is if you have enough resources behind you that you now do it because you own your time. If those things that Bo mentioned, those goals that you have, are going to take away from the ownership of your time, let that bring you purpose and bring it back to centralize it to the point that you don't get distracted with the shiny stuff that you daydream about, but it actually is going to take you away from the owning of your life. And that's the big part, I think, that people who are even successful, you'd be like, man, I have built up $3 million, but man, I could go buy this beautiful lake house for $2 million, and on paper I can afford this. But can you? Because I want you to own your life in financial independence, not leverage your life. Because when you have encumbrances, you don't really have independence and you don't really own your life. So be careful with those mental traps that can occur later in life.
And in this stage, one of the ways that you can measure how realistic is, if I've only got $3 million, I'm going to buy a $2 million house. Are you stress testing? And have you actually worked through scenario analysis? Have you worked with a financial advisor to determine, okay, can I do the things I want to do in the way that I want to do it? Or is it not feasible? We are proponents that conversation, that planning should happen before you get to retirement, not on day one. On day one of retirement is not when you want to figure out are all the plans going to work. You want to have figured that out a number of years before you got there so that you're well prepared and well positioned for it.
Yeah, I think when you're in your 50s, this is when you're trying to figure out, am I doing a non-conforming retirement, where meaning you're leaving either early before 65 if you're doing a 50s or even early 60s, Are you going to do a conforming at 65, or even go do I've got to work until I'm 70, 73? And sometimes that's because you financially are behind. Sometimes it's just because you love working. I pray that I have the opportunity to work well into my 70s. I love doing this type of content with you guys. And that's why whatever your case is, whatever gives you purpose or whatever drives you to reach your goals, I do want you to know that I recognize this is probably the stage where you do want to graduate the relationship to the next level. I talk about the abundance cycle all the time, and a lot of you have been with me for over a decade now, because we've been doing this show since 2006. And as you're fine-tuning your goals, I would encourage you, if you've come and you've learned, applied, and grown your assets to a level of success now that you just don't know what you don't know, you haven't stress test, you haven't turned that basket of funds into how that actually plays out in a goal situation to know, are you 70% of the way there? Are you 85% of the way? Are you 98% of the way? I love it when we have those type of retirement plan meetings where I can say, look, in all effective ways, it looks like you have enough. Let's figure out how you're going to live the best, most abundant version of your retirement and your independence life. That's exciting stuff for us. I mean, it just gets the optimist in me, the person that loves a good plan when it's put together and executed. This is what we hope we can bring to our financial mutants that are watching this content.
Brian, we've talked a lot about how to be wealthy by age, but we understand that there's more to wealth than money. Money is nothing more than a tool that allows us to do the things that we want to do. But if we can recognize in our 20s how to use money well, in our 30s how to build our money, our finances well, in our 40s how to keep the ship moving forward, then there's a really good chance that while the dollars are getting bigger and the balance sheet looks better and quote unquote we're wealthy, what we've really done, you said this earlier, is we've been able to buy our time back, where we get to do what we want to do, the way we want to do it, how we want to do it. Hopefully, the ideas that we've shared today will help you stay the course to make sure that as you work through this journey called life, that's the ultimate end goal that you're working towards.
Guys, go check it out, moneyguy.com/resources to get all the free stuff you want. If you want to accelerate your path, go to learn.moneyguy.com. And of course, if you're ready to take the relationship to the next level, go ahead and graduate through the abundance cycle. Reach out to us. We have a whole work with us section. Here's the thing. I heard Bo say a lot of great things there. Our taglines, headlines, whatever you want to call them. But it comes down to you either can own your financial life or it will own you. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy Team. Out.